Hi there, my name is Nathan, and this is another episode of The Human Experience. And today I'm going to talk about what I learned from joining the ambulance service. And I just want to stress, before I get started, that obviously this is just my opinion and this is just my experience. So everyone's journey is different, man, whether it's life, careers, whatever, every circumstances, everyone's is different. So yeah, this is my opinion. Like I say, I want to do a little warning there of there's going to be some real hard-hitting details for some people in regard to if they can relate to it or they've experienced it themselves, it might bring back them kind of emotions. So yeah, just, I'm not going to be too gory or anything like that, but just emotional side, it's tough to, even for myself, to talk about certain things. But also there's more of a light-hearted side, more of a fun side. So yeah, I want to dedicate this episode to my cousin Lewis. He suggested that I do this topic. And also all the colleagues that I've worked with within the patient transport and the ambulance service in the East Midlands. So yeah, just starting off really, just kind of doing the journey of a timeline of me joining. People that know me, they know I'm a people person. I love talking to people. I love being around people. I often talk too long to people. And yeah, that's why this job kind of appealed to me. And initially, I actually joined the patient transport. And wow, that was probably about 7 years ago. 6-7 years ago, I joined the patient transport. And I did that for about 6 months, and I love that, taking people to the renal unit, taking people to appointments, obviously the more kind of emotional side of going to hospices and stuff like that with patients, their final kind of journey from home. So yeah, that was a great kind of stepping stone for me joining the emergency services. And like I say, basically I met a lady in the patient transport that her partner was in the emergency services already, in the ambulance service. And she suggested that, I apply for the ambulance service because, I don't know, maybe she could see that I had that kind of drive and that love for being around that kind of environment, and that I might be good in that position. I was just, I don't know, I was oblivious to it. I didn't even think of that kind of route. But yeah, once I was aware and I'd spoke to other staff within patient transport that had either been in it or knew people in it or was around it, because we go to hospitals, so we talk to certain people within the hospital setting, and you get to know the locations and the wards and the other staff in the hospitals and stuff like that. So yeah, that was a great stepping stone. And like I say, I applied for the ambulance service in Leicester, and yeah, I got a reply that I was successful after going through so many processes and stuff like that, and I got a start date. And yeah, you kind of think here we go, you know what I mean? And again, everyone would have had their own kind of reasons for joining or their own kind of journey to getting to apply and stuff like that. But for me, I was applying for an ambulance technician. So you had 3 main ranks that were on the road in the ambulance, of having a HCA, healthcare assistant, ambulance technician, and a paramedic. And all them roles, basically, you worked on an ambulance and, you dealt with every kind of job that you can think of. But you just had a different skill set, a different pay band, and in some regards, sometimes a different kind of way you were viewed, because you had this rank on your shoulder. So people might judge it for better or for worse, or maybe be a bit indifferent, but there was definitely a rank system, and that was probably just from the age-old tradition of the ambulance service. So yeah, it kind of for me was so fun in embarking on this journey. with my cohort. So obviously you join with a set of people, and it's almost like going back to school in the sense of you're going to be back in a classroom, you're going to be with a bunch of people that you don't know, and you've just kind of been thrown together because you've all got that common thing of being in that cohort, you know, joining at that time basically. So I went to the training centre for the ambulance service, and also with our course, it was a fairly new course, so we also went to Nottingham University, to Trent University to have a few talks, and yeah, most of it was in-house training, but some of the university was involved with the whole assessment side of it and grading side and stuff like that. And yeah, like I say, you meet this bunch of people, and I loved it in my group because there was a mixture of, you know, ages, experience, backgrounds, everything. So it was really cool. And I knew for a lot of them people that were in my cohort that it was a proud moment for them. You know what I mean? Like even during the whole course, throughout the course, there was times we were talking about our families and what it meant to them for us to have joined, and you know, just the challenge of this, you know, joining this service and having this job and going on this career. Like you really feel like you're on a beginning of some kind of adventure or whatever it is to be, you know what I mean? So yeah, that was really good. You go through that training course, which is about 10, maybe 12 weeks or something like that. I don't know, maybe it's a bit more. You'll have to tell me in the comments, I can't remember now. But yeah, it's a significant amount of time that you're doing all the kind of theory side, you know, you're doing practical kind of tests, and you're being taught through presentations. You know, you also do the driving aspect of it, so driving on blue lights. And it's a great mixture. It's a great mixture, like I say, of theory, practical, and hands-on kind of stuff. So yeah, that was really fun. Even the fact that we got a talk from the police that was about predominantly like about RTAs. So like he was giving us like real life accounts of what you might turn up to on the roads, and you know, historic cases that have happened. You know, really kind of troubling stuff, like a guy crashed his car, it burst into flames, and last thing he did was carry his kids out of the car. Like I think it was the back window had smashed in, or one of the windows was smashed, and he just managed to get his kids out of the car, and he burned alive in his car. And it's like, wow, that's deep. Or somebody that just got took out on they'd come back from the pub and they were walking across a dual carriageway or a motorway, and they got struck by a car, and this driver, like obviously he got killed as well in the impact, because the guy has gone through his window screen and took the driver out and himself out. And yeah, just turning up to these scenes in the middle of nowhere, do you know what I mean, on the motorway. So yeah, they were really kind of hard-hitting stories, and you know, kind of you don't know what to expect joining, but you also are aware that you're going to be thrust into some really interesting and demanding situations, but nothing prepares you for actually doing it. So yeah, once you've done the training, you then go on this, you do like this, you do your hours on the road basically. So you're third manning, and there's, you know, normally 2 members of staff on an ambulance, but you're the third person. So you're almost like, you're always helping out, but it's probably quite useful for you to kind of do it at a more of a distance, because there's 2 staff that are doing their normal shift, and you're kind of observing as well as trying to take part and help out as much as you can. So you're an extra pair of hands. And obviously you're coming across things for the first time. Every job is new to you, whether it's an old elderly person with a nosebleed that just won't stop, to like someone who has had a fall, or again, going to a road traffic accident. So for me, during my kind of doing my hours and being part of a crew and being assessed for one shift, I got a job where, and again, everyone will have a different story to tell and a different, you know, thing that they've been through. But I went to a farmer who had collapsed in a lane, and I believe something had happened with his trailer. Either something had fell off or he was trying to fix it. And obviously through doing that exertion, he'd gone into a cardiac arrest, you know. And again, obviously you turn up to this case and you don't know what's going on. There's like a queue of traffic in this lane and the tractor's blocking half the road, and this person is just laying in the the grass verge of this lane. And yeah, you're having to do something that is, you've learned it in the class of what things to go through and what to assess and how to treat, but like nothing prepares you for that environment, being around these elements on the outside, and like also like family being around, and the public being around. You're having to deal with so much stuff, and then other staff coming in and helping out. And with this incident, like basically this farmer got treated at the roadside, and then he was blue lighted to resus, and the air ambulance were called because I think of the location of this particular job, they knew that it might be needed for them to get them out of there by air. But luckily the road was fine to use, and the air ambulance staff, who are fantastic, and really kind of, for me, my experience with them is they're so willing to help you be involved, because obviously they are a lot more experienced. They're doctors and advanced paramedics and stuff like that. So they've got a lot of experience and time in, and yeah, they just kind of talk you through what you're doing or how you can help them. And yeah, I found them really helpful, and it's a great part of the service, the air ambulance. So hats off to them. And yeah, we took this patient to the hospital, and yeah, later on, well, this is the thing, sometimes in the chaos, you don't even know what happens at the end. Like, you hand over a patient or you deliver this patient to the hospital, and it's all about collecting your thoughts, writing down the job of what's happened, and yeah, just having a bit of a breather normally. So yeah, I don't actually know what happened to that guy, but yeah, it wasn't looking good as he was going into the hospital. And at the time, his wife had come on the ambulance with the air ambulance staff. I was in the back, and I was just consoling the wife, and trying to reassure her that we're doing everything we can, and stuff like that. So that was very emotional. It was like I wasn't really taking on a hands-on approach with the patient, because the staff was there. There was more than enough staff to deal with that, but it was more that kind of, like I say, dealing with the family, and that is tough in any job, especially when you have someone pass away a job. That's the thing that it takes a lot out of you as well, not just to deal with that actual job and know that there's nothing more you can do, but also that, yeah, someone has just lost their loved one. Do you know what I mean? And I could always relate to that fact, because I've lost friends and I've lost family myself. So it kind of reminds you of that as well, if you've been through that already. So it's definitely a tough emotional roller coaster doing these jobs. So yeah, there's so many different cases. I went to a motorbike accident as well, which was, very, severe head trauma for the patient. And again, being blue lighted, and reading up about his case actually in the paper, that he actually was just, in long-term kind of recovery. And again, I don't know the actual outcome, but I know that he survived, getting to the hospital and being in the hospital for some time, because like I say, the newspaper report had been a few weeks after the incident and had stated that he was kind of, what I understand, stable, and they were just kind of waiting to see how he recovered. I understand he's probably in some kind of coma, whether it was induced or not. And yeah, just waiting to see how he is once he wakes up. So you also understand that aspect as well, of like, the more time you're in and you do these jobs, the more I thought that you do what you can, but at the end of the day, you're at the mercy of kind of biology, of of medicine, of science, you know what I mean? Of like, what can you do? You're very limited sometimes to what you can do. And there's lots of great interventions and operations and procedures that you can do with people. But at the end of the day, I always felt like the body is the final line, as in it has its final kind of say of like, can I deal with this trauma? Can I deal with this internally and help this person recover from a kind of just biological stance of like, is it able to recover, the body? And you know, the hospitals, to me, and our job is to support that as much as we can, you know, support the body as much as we can to see them have a good outcome. And yeah, like I say, you're at the mercy of that. So yeah, another thing, sorry, during the training was speaking to our actual trainer on our there was a couple of trainers that you know help you get through the course, and one of our trainers, and this is a thing joining a new job that I've never had, is that you have to be super aware of like what you might go through. You know, you're joining a job, and one of the first things that you're told about is, you know, look after yourself and be aware of when you're under a lot of stress and strain, and you are very likely to get PTSD because of the things you're going to see and go through. So I was immediately aware, more or less from the get-go, that one of my trainers was you know, had been on the road, and from what I understood was now a trainer because they didn't want to be on the road anymore, or they'd experienced too much on the road, and basically they were suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. So we were seeing that as a new cohort of being so enthusiastic and up for joining and doing this job. We could see, like I could see that the impact it can have on someone. And, you know, without going into too many details, like I understood that one of the jobs that had eventually got to the trainer was like an infant death. And yeah, I could totally understand how that would be very troubling and very hard to deal with. So yeah, you know, you see a lot of things. This is just in the first few weeks of being on the road kind of thing. And again, just coming into a new job, a new profession. I'm just coming from patient transport. Some people are coming from, you know, some of the paramedics have gone straight from college, A-levels to uni, and then gone on the road. So, you know, there's a mixture of experiences that staff have been through prior, and some have not been through a lot at all. And that can benefit them or not benefit them. It depends. Sometimes you need life experience, sometimes you need an open kind of mind to things. So they both have their ups and downs. But yeah, one thing I want to say before I touch on some of the kind of more downside of the ambulance service is the amazing staff. There's amazing staff that I met in patient transport and in the emergency services and in the hospitals, like so dedicated, you know, so knowledgeable, and it's their life's work. This career is something they're fully dedicated to. And in some cases, they might have had a parent or another family member that has worked within, you know, healthcare, and they're kind of carrying on the baton of like working within healthcare. And yeah, I'd say the service is similar to what I would say police service or military service or something like that would be. There's definitely a bond between the staff and any people that have worked in healthcare. And you know, I think the ambulance are known as a kind of green team, you know what I mean, that are out there kind of doing their best for the community, basically serving the community. So yeah, that was really good to see. You know, there's great kind of banter amongst staff. You know, there's always that dark humor. You know, some people would label certain members of staff the Green Reaper because they'd probably been to the most amount of patients dying on them that week. And that wasn't to take the piss to say that they can't do their job or something like that. It was more kind of that kind of humor of, wow, look how many like serious incidents you've been to. Like, you can't help it. You know, if you just go to some routine calls, you're not going to have a patient deceased. But if you just go to serious job after serious job, it's more likely to happen. And you can't dictate that, you know what I mean? You're just at the mercy of, you know, what's happening in the city at the time, what job you're allocated, and it can happen at any minute. It can happen. I remember one job that me and a crewmate went to where we were on our way back to break. So we're like, you know, been told by control that we're heading back for break. And then all of a sudden, because we're the nearest resource to a serious incident, that, yeah, you know, that's cancelled, obviously, which is understandable. And you just go straight to this job. And to be honest, that was one of the most serious jobs that I went to after doing my hours. And that was a chap that had fell through a roof. I understand he was trying to repair or clean a roof of this business, and he fell through and he landed on this kind of countertop. And yeah, he had severe trauma again to his head. And yeah, just to give you a kind of idea of what happens is, you know, you just come through with your bags and your equipment, and like I say, for this particular job, you don't know what you're going to see. And yeah, I've never seen someone, you know, fall through a roof. So number one, you're seeing that. And then number two, you're thinking, you know, along the lines of your training of, what do I need to do? And, you know, when you see these kind of messy scenes, you really kind of, you just go into that kind of autopilot mode of like, do what I've been trained to do. But you're also, as a human, aware of like, wow, this is pretty crazy. Like, your adrenaline's pumping. And yeah, I'll be honest, that job really took me back. And again, the staff I was with were fantastic. You know, we had backup response, we had all kinds of resources were coming to this job. And, you know, unfortunately, this person died at the scene. And we did what we could. But, you know, it's just the immediacy of what you've been through, handling all that. And I'll be honest, like, the way that job affected me, which I didn't tell a lot of people, only the people I was there with obviously knew, or I've spoke to a few family members and friends after. But yeah, I actually, after dealing with that incident and just clearing up our stuff, I had a moment where I totally blacked out. And I don't know if it was shock or whatever, but I basically collapsed. And I don't know if it was me feeling a bit queasy about what I'd saw, or the emotional side of it, or myself going through that adrenaline of the incident. But yeah, I collapsed. And I just remember, if you've ever blacked out, it was like just instantly out, and then waking up for me on the floor, looking up, and I had two members of staff holding my legs up, so they were kind of trying to get my blood circulation back to my body and my head. And yeah, when you go through some kind of shock, obviously your circulation like can change in the fact that like you can kind of, they either constrict or they open up your blood vessels when you're going through shock. And you know, that can lower your blood pressure. And obviously with your blood trying to get to your head, if it lowers as a kind of response, you might just pass out because you're not getting enough blood to your brain. And yeah, you just need to shut down. It's like a shutdown thing for your body, you know. I'm not doing the best at explaining that, but that's what I understood that I went through anyway, without, you know, knowing too much of the technical aspect of what my body was doing physiologically. But yeah, that's what I felt, you know, I blacked out and I just woke up on the floor. And I hadn't hurt myself or anything like that, but I just felt a bit lightheaded. And yeah, like I say, staff were so supportive, but that definitely had an impact on me from that day forward. You know, you go to certain calls, you hear these, you know, the sound come through on your, you know, your ambulance console. And yeah, if it's kind of sounding serious, you're kind of thinking along the lines of a previous job sometimes. So that can be an emotional kind of drain on you. And I guess in certain regard, that's when I first suffered some kind of, I would say, PTSD. But it wasn't the first time in my life, because I'd been through other things previously that I'll talk about another time. But yeah, that was something that brought a lot of feelings back to me of going through something traumatic. So yeah, other kind of things though that you go through, more kind of fun things, is like just weird and wonderful things in this job that everyone would have come across something that they can just, you know, look back on and just chuckle to themselves. But you know, I remember going to a care home, and this elderly lady, she had chest pain, and she was short of breath. So we did an ECG, and basically for this, you're putting the dots on someone's chest in specific locations to monitor their heart and see what their heart's doing. And obviously I told the lady what we were doing and what was going to happen and why we were doing it. And she was like, you know, in her 80s. You could tell she was quite a character, and she had no qualms about stripping off for staff, you know, to do what they needed to do. She'd probably been through it times before. And yeah, so she opened up her cardigan. I'm putting these dots on, and she looks at me and our eyes just meet, and she goes, "I bet you love your job." And I just thought in that moment, I know she's just having some fun or whatever. And I was just like so embarrassed in a way, but also just like getting through it and saying, yeah, I'm just doing what I need to do kind of thing. And yeah, my crewmate after, we were just laughing about that, to say like, it's nice how light-hearted some of your patients can be, how fun they can be, and how you're just in these odd situations. Like obviously someone would not do that to you normally in day-to-day life. So yeah, that was kind of an interesting experience. And also the fact that things that you do, like we went to a birth and the baby had actually been delivered by the mum, and I think it was either a family friend or a family member. So they were on the bed, but then you know, it was me cutting the cord for this newborn and this mum that was there on the bed, and just seeing the kind of, you know, great feeling of this new life coming into existence. That's a great kind of job to go to. But cutting the cord and thinking, wow, this ain't even my kid. Like the first time I've cut a cord and it's not even my own child. Like, it's an honor, but it's also like surreal. Like, you don't mind me just doing this. I've never seen you before, and I'm just gonna go there and do this. So yeah, that was kind of another kind of interesting and eye-opening kind of thing that you're privileged to be a part of, really. So yeah, like I say, some staff are so dedicated and they're so knowledgeable and they're so helpful. And you know, out on the road, you come across these doctors that also respond to calls, and they'll be like doing critical care and certain procedures on the road that you could only really do in a hospital, you know. And they were really kind of inspiring people. You know, there was one specific doctor in Leicester that he would respond to so many really, really critical calls, and was just known as this kind of figurehead of like, if something's going on as a crew and this person responds to it and they are called out and they back you up, that you just feel this overwhelming sense of relief, because you've got this really experienced and really down-to-earth person that is going to support and help you through this incident. And you know, that's a bit of help, because another thing that staff will relate to is going to some of these things that I was mentioning there, the more critical cases. Like, you feel very exposed, you feel very vulnerable, because at the end of the day, you're limited to the kit that you've got on the ambulance and what you can actually do. Do you know what I mean? In terms of stabilizing someone and getting them to hospital. And then at the hospital, obviously they have a lot more resources, a lot more procedures and things in place, you know, departments that specifically deal with certain things. So you're a bit of what would you say, a jack of all trades of medicine, because you're dealing with mental health, you're dealing with cardiac things, respiratory stuff, like I say, births, So like, you know, maternity stuff, and just like falls and kind of trauma basically. So yeah, it's such a mix, and you know, how can you really be an expert in every field? You might like certain jobs, you know, certain staff really enjoyed you know, reading the ECGs and understanding what's going on. And you know, certain staff more like the care side of it, like helping someone up from a fall and treating their wounds. So everyone had their expertise, but again, you're going to any job, you can't say what job you're going to. Whereas I felt in the hospitals, you become this HCA or this nurse or this doctor in a specific department, and therefore you're like used to dealing with that specific problem. And even if they're the more kind of rare kind of, you know, diseases and illnesses, you might have seen that more than say an ambulance staff that is just going to every kind of job. So that's really hard. And yeah, touching on some of the more the worst side of being in the service and what I saw was just the fact that, you know, when they say the NHS is in a crisis, it is totally true. It's really true. Like there's so many staff that I've seen that are really broken and burnt out. And I got to that point myself, and you feel helpless to do stuff. You know, you see this queuing at the A&Es of the ambulances, but also it's in the department. Do you know what I mean? They're queuing in the triage part, or in the waiting rooms, or they're waiting for beds in the hospital. It's like, it really deflates you that you know, you're bringing a patient in, and not only have they been waiting for an ambulance for a few hours, maybe after a fall and being on the floor, but then they're going to wait in the ambulance for a few hours, and then they're going to wait in the A&E department for a few more hours. So it's, yeah, very kind of demotivating to know that, you know, you're driving in some nights on a busy night, and you know, you might have already been to the hospital, and you know there's going to be a long wait for this patient. To be fair to the NHS and the system, of like ground floor, the staff are just working the best they can with what they've got available, whether that's space, whether that's ambulance resources, whatever it is, we're doing the best that we can. But for whatever reason, and I'm not saying it's management's fault or necessarily the politician's fault, but just that something needs to be done. We're recognizing something's needing to be done, and we can't voice our opinions to people that are above us because there's no channel, or we feel like we're not going to be listened to, or we feel like there's nothing that can be done about things. And I don't think that's the case. And I feel if there was more communication, this is an industry between the, you know, the highest level, you know, of management or of owners, to the middle management and the ground floor staff, that we could collaborate and work together a lot more to resolve these problems. And the thing I saw with the queues is that there's patients that didn't need to necessarily come into hospital. You know, if there was more kind of on-call doctors and the GP services weren't as stretched, a lot of these patients wouldn't have even got to needing an ambulance. So it definitely starts for me more in the prevention side. And that's what troubled me a lot, of like, I was feeling helpless of this conveyor belt of staff that are trying to deal with this never-ending list of patients and calls that are coming through, and that something needed to give. And for me, it was the flow of patients coming into the system. Like, why are we not preventing this? And some of it was the NHS crisis, to me, reflects our social crisis in the modern world. And that is of, you know, poor mental health, you know, the fast pace of modern life not allowing for healthy lifestyles. So poor diets, you know, this whole processed foods, even the environment that we're in is so toxic, you know, in terms of work shift patterns, work-life balance, you know, even the products that we use in our environment now, in our homes, this whole thing now of microplastics infiltrating our bodies and causing these kind of diseases and illnesses within us. So like I say, until we deal with the root cause of a lot of these problems, we're continuing to have problems, because the list of patients and the capacity that these hospitals can handle is not going to increase with the rate that the problems are increasing. One example of this is people that were having MIs or heart attacks. That was becoming more and more frequent and at younger ages. And the reason we got to realize that as ambulance staff is, one, we're going to these cases, and two, we'd sometimes be able to go with the patient into the hospital, and they'd go into a place called the cath lab, and that's where they'd have the operation, the procedure done to help them if they were having a heart attack. So they'd clear the blockage and they'd put in a stent, or people might have, you know, heart bypasses and stuff like that. But we'd be able to see the procedure, say, of them having a stent, because it was really quick. Obviously, your acting time is really important to get that blood flow going back to the heart and back to the body. And yeah, we'd speak to the theatre nurses and we'd see the surgeon doing the procedure, and you'd get a little bit of time to talk to the staff, and they'd be just saying like, yeah, this is just becoming more and more common. Like, there's already procedures that are kind of booked in, and then there's the ones that we bring in as ambulance staff that are like the non-booked. They're just kind of happening day to day, you know, in the moment. They're just brought in. It's just to say that we can see that trend. And again, as staff, we feel like, who can we tell? You know, we're not trying to say that, you know, the food industry is evil or that society is really bad, but we're just trying to say we've noticed a problem and we can see the repercussions of it. You know, there's patients that are suffering, there's family members that are going through, you know, things as well, of like not knowing what's happening with their loved ones, if they might pass away or they might just be affected, you know, the rest of their life. They might be medically retired, or something happens to them that you know, lowers their quality of life, basically. And these things, I feel, not 100%, but some of them can be prevented for sure. And we just need to, as a service, I feel, there needs to be a thing in place before we interact with people that are going through a problem, that are having a medical issue. There needs to be that prevention. So one example would be like weight management and managing people's diets. You know, if we improve people's diets and we lower their weight, then that's going to stop or prevent so many complications happening throughout their life and them needing to use the healthcare service. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, that was definitely a massive frustration for me. You know, another pattern that I noticed is that if people were struggling in society, like they have very poor kind of standards of living, so council estates and poor kind of education, then we were going to them areas a lot more. You know, I didn't really attend so much the affluent areas. And it was happening, because sometimes living the good life as such can be bad for you as well. You know, living that kind of, you know, overconsumption life or luxury living can lead to other kind of health implications, you know, because you're not kind of ever exerting yourself, or you're overeating and stuff like that. So yeah, I definitely noticed that going to these kind of poorer areas where there was a lack of education, that was another thing that could have been instilled in people, like how to live right, you know, how to live healthier for less. Things you can do day to day, you know, if you haven't got the time or the resources. Yeah, like I say, you know, there was a lot of things, again, the stresses and strains that you feel coming from a poorer background. Like, it's a challenge, yeah? You've got the financial challenge, you've got the kind of social challenges going on, you know, even for work, for example, like you're probably doing a job that you don't enjoy or is very demanding on you. And then you have no time to yourself because you're just trying to survive. You know, we've all felt it with the cost of living. You know, if people are banging in overtime, it means that they're neglecting another aspect of their life, whether that's their own health or being there for their loved ones, or just having time out. You know what I mean? Like, you're taking annual leave, but then you're doing loads of overtime. So like, you're kind of neglecting yourself, you know, in your downtime to do stuff that fills you back up. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, there's definitely a thing going on in modern life where I think the younger generation now that are coming through, they're not valuing like this whole hustle culture and, you know, striving for careers, and they want that balance. You know, they want to enjoy life, they want to have great experiences, they want to have downtime, and yeah, they want to have ambition to do stuff and achieve stuff and help people and volunteer and do all that. So it's very hard to balance now in life. And you know, we're being aware of all these problems now, like I say, with plastics, with doing shift work and knowing the effects that that has on you. And that feeds back into the ambulance service. Like, you know, there's many ways that they support staff, but there's also ways that, you know, the old kind of shift patterns of doing days and nights, for me, that really took its toll. Like, I literally felt like I was jet lagged every shift, because I was doing 6 a.m. till 6 p.m. for 2 days. And then I was alternating to 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. for another 2 days. And then you'd have a chunk of days off, 3-4 days off, and then you'd go back into that pattern. So that really took its toll, because, you know, you're half asleep at the end of your, you know, your last shift, definitely, and at the start of your first shift normally, you're adjusting to them times, and you're really feeling tired. So not only are you dealing with these very demanding jobs at times, but you're not in the right frame of mind or the right place yourself sometimes. And yeah, definitely the good thing about the ambulance service is having that crewmate, having that support, working as a team is a great thing, because you're really there for each other. You're really going through stuff together, and you know, your work colleagues are just so invaluable to helping you get through certain things, whether they're offering their support, you know, someone just to talk to, someone to relate to what you're going through. It's just a great kind of camaraderie amongst the staff. So yeah, I think another thing that I was against myself personally, in my opinion, was like, I was working during COVID, and the hard thing there was whenever we went to like an incident where we had to do some kind of resuscitation, we had to do CPR, then we had to get dressed up in these respirators, hoods, and these full kind of overalls before we went in and dealt with the patient. So that delayed their treatment time. And obviously I got that. That was trying to not put the staff at risk. But it was very odd. To me, it felt like, when I think back to the film E.T., and when the, you know, the government agents and the scientists are dealing with E.T., they're all like donned in these big kind of, they look like kind of nuclear radiation suits. You know, you've got the kind of plastic visor and their head to toe kind of body stuff. And that's the kind of thing that we was wearing, you know. And it made it less personable. Like, you're going to someone, you know, they might be conscious, they might not be, and your family is around, and you're trying to communicate with them, but you're at this physical distance because they can't see you, you know, through this hood very well. They can't hear you very well. So it really made communication difficult, and it made it hard to relate to the family and the patient, to be more relatable to them and be this kind of, you know, person coming in to help them, because you were at a distance in a way. So yeah, during COVID, it was really hard. And again, the staff mentally, they were thinking that, wow, we're going into these cases where these patients have probably got COVID, and we're not only putting our own health at risk, but our family's health. When we finish a shift and we go home, we don't know if we've got COVID ourselves. So that was a major stress and strain during COVID. And again, we know we've signed up for this. You know, it's like the fireman that runs into the fire. That's what he's signed up for. We know as frontline staff, when there's any kind of pandemic or any kind of serious incident, that we're just going in wholeheartedly to support this person because this is what we've signed up for. But I'm just making people aware of the reality, whether you're thinking of joining, whether you're already in the service, just be aware of what you will go through or what you've been through. And that a piece of advice I'd say now after leaving the ambulance service is that know when you've had enough, know when you've done enough. Because at the end of the day, there's always a recruitment drive, there's always new staff coming in, and that's like any kind of job. But with this job, I feel there is a bit of more of a dropout because, you know, it takes it out of you physically and emotionally. This job really takes it out of you. And people will leave in a number of ways. One way I noticed was they might just not necessarily leave healthcare, they might just go into another aspect of it. So some people went up the management kind of ladder, and that meant that they had less time on the road, less responsibilities dealing with patients, and more towards staff and the running of the service. Some went into different departments within hospitals, and that was maybe to get away from the kind of being on the road life of, like, you know, again, you're turning up to anything. Whereas when you work in a certain department or in a hospital or something, then you kind of know what you're getting. You know, apart from resus, you kind of know, you know, if you work in a specific department, what you're going to be dealing with day in, day out. And you become quite proficient at that because you're dealing with it day in, day out. So yeah, I would say know what you're going through and know when you've had enough and that you need to move on in some aspect. And for me, I didn't know another avenue. Being a technician, I didn't know if I wanted to go into some other area. So I just left and I went into a totally different job of, you know, I'm a lorry driver now. So I needed that respite. I needed that time away from healthcare. And I still love the thing that stands for, you know, of helping people and supporting the community. I love that still. And like I say, during COVID, I was there where, you know, the street was literally clapping for me and my crewmate when we was taking a patient in, and it felt so good. It felt really good that we was getting that support. But again, from the other side, we kind of knew what we was going into, of these endless queues at the hospital. And it was unprecedented, obviously, what we was going through, you know, the way people had to be isolated. What was really hard is you couldn't bring the family members in with the patient if they were suspected with COVID or they, you know, were going into hospital. They just had to say bye to them at home if they could, and maybe tell them that they're going to have their mobile with them and they'll ring them when they get a chance. But that was really hard because, again, as we know from the media coverage, some people never got to see their loved ones again. You know, they died in hospital and they never got to say goodbye to them. And I just think there's a learning curve there of we need to be aware. And, you know, I'm trying to be as sensitive as I can with this, and I have lost people myself, but just to say, not to be afraid of death so much, you know, to be accepting that things happen and things are out of our control sometimes. And that if, for me, in my eyes, I know this is not like any kind of coming from a, you know, anyone that knows the system inside out, but I'm just saying, like, maybe we should allow patients and family to make their own choices. You know, if they want to join them and they want to say goodbye to them, then they should be allowed, you know what I mean? And it's just a learning curve. If we go through a pandemic again, which I hope we don't, but if we did, and, you know, certain things are reviewed and procedures that were put in place, and maybe we have a different way of dealing with things. But yeah, these are all in hindsight. So I know they're not easy decisions to make. You know, the government made the decision for lockdown. During that time, being the person that I am, and I always want to do, in my eyes, what I feel is fair and what is just. And I'll be honest, I refused the COVID jab. And I actually went to an anti-lockdown protest while working for the ambulance service, because I wasn't afraid of, being pulled up on that. And I wasn't pulled up on that, but I wasn't afraid. Some people might have thought that was selfish because I went to a mass gathering and I could have got COVID and then gone onto a work shift and given someone COVID. And yeah, that was a reality. But my thing was, why don't be so afraid of what can happen? Like, I'm on the front line. I'm willing to, for this job, for this just paycheck, to come across patients that potentially have COVID and get it and give it my own family, let alone the next patient, because I've signed up for that. Do you know what I mean? And I know obviously my friends and family haven't, but it's like, it's just in the world. Do you know what I mean? It's happening in the world and we can't prevent everything, and this fed on to, I felt really bad for the carers in the care homes, because they were put under pressure to have this jab as one of the first group of people, as well as frontline healthcare staff, to have this jab, because it was like an obligation that they had to their patients, the people they work with in the care homes, so they had a duty of care. But I feel that was very unfair. I feel as long as they went through the procedure of using hand gel and masking up and being as cautious as they could, I don't feel the pressure for them individually should have been to have the jab. Like, let them make their own decision. Let people make their own decisions. And again, people weren't allowed to visit homes. So again, their loved ones might have got ill in the home and passed away, and they never got to see their loved one. Like, what would you rather do? Like, have the danger of contracting COVID or get to see someone for the last time? Do you know what I mean? So I'm not saying there's a clear-cut answer, but I'm just saying things could be reviewed and looked at and done differently. You know what I mean? And my thoughts were, I got COVID while I was on the job, and I kind of probably know the patient that gave it me, which was fair enough. Like, I don't feel no way towards them. And that, then I had my time off while I had COVID and I couldn't work within the service. But that was just something that was happening at the time. And we get to learn later on that it might have come out of this lab, and that ultimately, yeah, it is someone's fault and it's not the general population's. It's just the fact that the way society is, the way we're dealing with things, even doing these tests in these labs, it's not natural, and therefore unnatural things will occur, as in pandemics that are caused by us, with diseases that are kind of modified and a lot more kind of contagious than they probably should be. So yeah, it's something to think about as humanity moves forward, of doing the right thing for us, for the planet. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, it has consequences. Another thing that I felt within the ambulance service that I didn't like was the whole kind of the way some staff were treated when jobs hadn't gone right, for whatever reason. And there was support for staff. Again, I'm not saying it's all bad, but sometimes you felt like if you made a mistake, like that was going to be you out of a job. And maybe that was more of a feeling than like statistically it happening, but it was like, I know one particular incident where the staff member was kind of singled out, and they kind of gunned for this person to either quit or made it very difficult for them to carry on doing what they were doing. And I just thought that was very unnecessary. I get things happen, like certain staff are sacked, obviously, like in any job, for not doing procedures correctly, or being abusive, or being neglecting their duties. But majority of staff are trying to do the right thing, and they make a genuine mistake or an accident that, yeah, might have serious consequences, but they didn't have bad intention. And I'm not saying they get treated bad always, but I just feel like it shouldn't be, we're just going to come down on you, even with the cases, like, again, I relate it to other things of like being a teacher. If a kid accuses you of something and you've been a teacher for the past 10, 15 years, that should hold up for something, yeah? There should be some common sense to say that there's never been an issue with this member of staff, and now there's this one-off incident. And, a lot of these kind of Jimmy Savile cases and stuff like that, they've made us like hyper vigilant of certain things and very distrustful. And again, in the ambulance service, the nice thing you see is you come through that door, and when you're wearing that uniform, you know, you go through the door of some stranger's house and you've got your uniform on, and you see the trust in their eyes, or you see the relief when you come in and help them. And at the end of the day, you're just a stranger. If I knocked on most of these doors on my days off, not in uniform, most people would be reluctant to open the door for whatever reason, because of the fear the media has put in them, or, you know, the perception of a young guy, you know, in a tracksuit or whatever. It's just, you know, it's a shame that society has got to that. We need to be more trusting. And yeah, there's obviously an element of not being naive to these people that are out to do harm, but the majority of people are not like that. Definitely not like that. So yeah, sorry, moving on. I always like to kind of come up with a kind of solution, you know, to what I'm talking about, because I want to be helpful in the things that I don't want to just be doom and gloom. And again, for me, again, talking about the ambulance service, I would always encourage someone to join it, and that this kind of video is just to bring about an awareness of what you're getting involved in. And it's not to discourage you, because you could join and have such a great impact on the service and move things forward, I hope. But I'm just highlighting the things that kind of need to be thought about and reconsidered maybe. And I'm sure a lot of staff can relate to a lot of the things that I've mentioned. So yeah, we need to definitely, as a kind of solution, we need a more holistic approach to dealing with patients. You know, prevention is better than cure. Prevention is better than treatment, you know. And this is going on a lot now. Obviously, you're seeing the things in America with the medical insurance, but also with the pharmaceutical companies. And I'm not saying there's some big evil thing in the world. I'm just saying they need to be held accountable. You know, the amount of patients I went to, and they're on antidepressants, they're on blood thinners, they're on blood pressure medication, they're on medication to lower their cholesterol. You know, the amount of procedures, like people having gastric bands and stuff like that. Like, the prevention needs to be in place a lot more. And I know there are services and things that happen, you know, prior to them going on this medication sometimes, but a lot of the time it's like we're, you know, when they say you're just fanning the flames of you know, this house is on fire of the NHS, and we're just fanning it with medication and appointments that are not really solving the issue, and procedures that are just, yeah, getting rid of the initial problem, but not the reason why the problem occurred in the first place. Do you know what I mean? And a lot of it, again, like I say, is to do with lifestyle, you know, whether that's the type of work we do, the type of diets that we're on, and the way we're living, you know, just the sedentary lifestyle. You know, we need to be more active, more out in nature and out in the fresh air. And yeah, this hustle culture is damaging, you know, this whole having success. Success is gauged in so many different ways, you know, being a great dad, being a great son or daughter to your parents, you know, later on in life, caring for them and looking out for them, and being a great friend, you know, being supportive, being around for your friends and family. There's different ways you can gauge success, and it's not just monetary or what position do you hold? Are you a CEO? Are you the head manager or whatever? It doesn't matter. It's like we're all cogs in this machine, and why not just make this machine work for everyone? Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's a great career, and like I say, you just need to know when you've had enough in terms of working in the ambulance service. Know when it's got to you enough that, yeah, maybe you want to be a trainer now. Maybe you want to get off the road and go and do the call center aspect of it. Like, you can still use your skill set, but maybe you've had enough of attending certain jobs and doing certain shift patterns and dealing with so much stuff emotionally and physically. Yeah. You know, for me, I think it's an ongoing thing. Yeah, I'm definitely scarred mentally, and Physically, it took it out of me as well. I actually got my first case of sciatica being in the ambulance service. And again, that was for me definitely taking patients up and down stairs, whether that's, you know, trying to get them out of their property or, you know, taking them somewhere in a care home or whatever. That definitely took it out of me. But yeah, mentally, there's things that I didn't deal with. Like there's things that are always going to be kind of in the back of my mind, but I accept them as experiences. And this is the one thing, this is probably the last kind of point I'm going to make to certain staff and people in the healthcare, is that remember that this is what you signed up for, yeah? And it's such a privileged and honorable position to be able to help these people, because you're helping people that, number one, either can't help themselves or just need help in that moment they're in crisis, whether that's mental health or something that's happened to them, an accident. And that, just to say that, remember that the reason you're helping them is because you're not in that situation. You know, you've not been involved in an RTC, you've not been, you know, through so much kind of troubled upbringing or circumstances that you've had this mental breakdown and you need to be sectioned or you need some kind of help. And even the era that you grew up in, you know, the patients we're dealing with that are in their 80s and 90s, they've lived a different life, you know, where maybe smoking was acceptable. So for them to be COPD and suffer from respiratory kind of ailments is normal. You know, certain people work with asbestos and therefore developed kind of respiratory issues. So, you know, we're just learning lots of things, you know, going to stroke wards and seeing people that have had strokes and learning why these things are happening. You know, maybe it was the amount of McDonald's. And just to say, when I see these queues outside the A&Es of ambulances and then, you know, the queues within the actual departments, I think to myself, what priority do we put on our health as a society? You know, this is the priority I see. I see that there's a McDonald's on every main road in every main city and town, and that it has a 24-hour drive-through, and that if you want a meal, you can get that within 2-3 minutes of ordering it at the drive-through or going in. And that, why is that not the same case for contacting your GP and being able to get through? You know, why is there not an equivalent of like being able to drive through a GP surgery or an A&E and just get immediate treatment? Do you know what I mean? Because the resources are not put in. And if McDonald's can maximize their profit and feed, you know, society in not such a good way, then why can't the NHS provide service for people that need it? And it's just because of what is emphasis is put on that, what budget is put into that. You know, there needs to be a lot more put in by society. And maybe that means we pay higher taxes. Maybe that means that we have, you know, less kind of holidays or less kind of ability to buy new things all the time. Do you know what I mean? We have to be more resourceful. There's going to be an impact. But if that means having better health, then I'm sure in the long run, that's going to have a better kind of impact on society overall and less of a strain. So yeah, to all the staff out there, keep doing what you're doing. The dedication is amazing. To all the patients out there that are unfortunate enough to go through that, just know that, you know, they're doing the best that they can, and that the system that you're in is sometimes broken in certain ways, but they're doing what they can, and just bear with them. Do you know what I mean? And it does have real consequences. You know, waiting lists mean that people, you know, say that have got cancer will now probably be diagnosed with a terminal cancer rather than early stages because they've waited so long for diagnosis and treatment. So it does have real repercussions, and that's why we need to take it seriously, basically. So yeah, like I say, that's all I've got time for on the human experience. I would love to see some comments from staff that have either been in the ambulance service or that some kind of healthcare setting, even the care staff as well, how they feel about the current situation. And always solutions. If you can offer solutions, that would be fantastic, because at the end of the day, even the higher up management and politicians, they watch, you know, things that are on YouTube, that are happening in social media. They are just people, and if we can get that message out to them, then, and they can relate to it themselves, their own experiences, then maybe things will get done. Do you know what I mean? People have to empathize sometimes by going through things themselves. And like I say, when these politicians and higher up management realize that it can happen to them or their friends and family, which they do probably realize, that change will come about. Yeah, when you relate to it and you understand it more, that's when change can happen. And yeah, just to the ground floor staff, just keep doing what you're doing. Yeah, it's amazing, amazing career, amazing job, and there's some amazing people in it. So yeah, that's all I've got time for, people. And I'll see you next time on The Human Experience.